Welcome to Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. Today, the topic is how to use artificial intelligence for DNA source analysis, original, derivative, or authored. So in our Airtable basis, we have the option to upload attachments. And for my project, I've been uploading images of the records this time just to see how I like doing that. And I have some images of censuses, court records, deeds, tax records, and so forth. And what I've been trying to experiment with is, can AI look at that image and then analyze it? And following a set of rules that I give it, can it classify it correctly as original, derivative, or authored? And so it's been doing a pretty good job with that. So here you can see it knows that this is an original image. And but next, I want to work on figuring out if AI can help analyze DNA sources. So here are two examples. We have a through lines screenshot and an ancestry matches by cluster. And then right above that, we're still looking at a documentary source, but this is a screenshot of an ancestry collection for a land patent from Mississippi with no image, no original image. So it just has like the index. So when I started this experiment, which I like to call my work with AI as experiments because AI is so new and I feel like we have so many things that we wonder, can AI help with that? And so as I try it, I just consider it an experiment. It might fail, it might work, and it might need to be tweaked to work better. So that's kind of what I'm going to show you here. So I started my experiment in ChatGPT with the 5.4 thinking model, which is, a thinking model will be really important for jobs like analysis in genealogy, where it's complex and it needs to follow detailed rules. So to get started with this conversation, I thought I would do a prompt chain or a chain of thought prompt where I start with something simple and then progressively get the AI to think about more complex issues. So I just started with, for a genealogist to determine if an image of a source is original, derivative, or authored, what do they need to know? Remember that genealogists are different from historians and don't use the terms primary source and secondary source. They use original, derivative, and authored. Now, in past experiments with AI, we noticed that AI always gets confused with primary and secondary sources in the way that historians think about it. And so I'd like to remind it, we don't use those terms. So focus on original, derivative, and authored. And so it thought for 16 seconds and came up with some things that a genealogist should think about when trying to figure out if something's original, derivative, or authored. Then next, I mentioned the fact that you can tell if it's derivative based on the dates mentioned in the source, like when it was created. For example, a 1705 deed that's been fully typed is a derivative because deeds in 1705 were always handwritten. Then I asked it to do a little research on the web and find out what range of years would records begin to be fully typed as originals. And I guessed around the 1900s because in my research, I started to see fully typed deeds in original deed books in the 1910s and 1920s. And around that time, before that, they were forms that had some typed information and others were handwritten. And then by the 1950s, it was fully typed. And so after thinking for 27 seconds, checking sources online like Wikipedia, ChatGPT came up with this. A fully typed original becomes plausible in the late 1890s, fairly common in the 1900s to 1910s, and routine by the 1920s for many office-created records. And then it gives some ideas there. So it gave us a rough dating guide for source analysis, and that was helpful. So then I tried this in my Airtable base and it was able to correctly identify that a fully typed deed from the 1840s was probably a derivative. Now it's the most original source that I've found so far, but it's still helpful to think about the fact that that was typed from the original deed that was handwritten. Now, before diving into teaching the AI about DNA source analysis, I wanted to just quickly think about and redefine the rules that I want for this. And a note is that if you don't tell the rules that you have for analysis and classification to the AI, it will come up with its own and it may or may not be what you want. And so I decided to go with what we teach in Research Like a Pro with DNA, which is that Original sources are reports created by the DNA match companies while comparing raw data of individuals. So if you take a DNA test at Ancestry and you get a match list from Ancestry, that's an original source. Same with Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, Living DNA 23, and even GEDmatch, where I feel like GEDmatch is comparing that raw DNA data with other raw DNA data and coming up with match pages. Um, so just trying to make a set of rules that could work to be defined easily. Although there are a lot of challenges with this because, for example, authored sources can be found in Ancestry and MyHeritage. Well, what about derivative? Derivative sources for DNA would be reports from third-party tools that pull data from DNA databases, so like Genetic Affairs or DNA.com. And then authored would be reports created by combining original and derivative sources, either by a human author or a DNA company, such as Ancestry Throughlines, MyHeritage, Theory of Relativity. When someone creates a DNA Painter chromosome map by copying and pasting segments from the testing company into DNA Painter. Visual phasing, what are the odds? Banyan DNA. Most of these are ones where the user takes information from an original source and puts it into a creation that they're making. So those are the rules that I came in with to define for the AI that I want in Airtable. So then I kind of gave an example of an ancestry match page and how the agent was defining this as derivative, but I wanted it to be original and kind of worked with ChatGPT to come up with a special rule for DNA sources. Because using the original rules that I had for like, oh, if it's typewritten, then it's going to be derivative. That doesn't work for the DNA sources. They're all typed. So we needed to come up with a special rule. And so I said, let's do kind of the rules that I just told you. And then it came up with a rule that we could add to the Airtable field agent about DNA sometimes having authored sources on Ancestry DNA, like through lines, but that usually those testing companies are going to be original. So the final instructions for the Airtable agent for source analysis talk about, documentary sources and then a special rule for DNA sources where we treat reports and databases viewed at testing companies as originals, even when they're modern digital displays. This includes match lists, shared matches, ethnicity, chromosome browsers, cluster reports, and similar outputs. Then some sources within testing companies should be treated as authored when they combine original DNA data with user contributed tree data like through lines and theory of relativity. So I thought this set of rules was pretty good. So I'm ready to add it to Airtable. So if you go to a new field and then create it as a field type that is a field agent, then I gave it a name source type AI, and then choose your model. I chose Gemini 3 Pro. And so anything that's like pro or extended thinking would be good for this. And then pasted the custom instructions here and had it be an analyze attachment type so that it will analyze this attachment and follow these instructions. Then click save. And then I went ahead and clicked to run the agent because I had already tested it a few times. So now it's analyzing this image. So it's the type of field agent that I selected is to analyze an attachment. So you have to choose that kind and then give it the instructions. And now it takes a while because we're using the pro or thinking model. So it's going to think for like 30 seconds to a minute before it's done. So then when it's done, we can open it up. So the first one to finish was the through lines. So let's open the through lines analysis by expanding the box here. And then we can see what it came up with. So it says the image is a digital screenshot of a web interface. So part of my instructions were to just spend 2 sentences describing that. And so the first part is just describing the image. And then after that, let's watch it again. After it describes the image, then it tells what type of source it is. So it correctly labeled it as authored, and that's because I told it that through lines should be authored. Right, so it does a good job. It says the prompt special instructions explicitly state that Ancestry through lines are authored because they mix DNA match data with compiled tree-based interpretation rather than simply presenting the company's original DNA output. The text within the image confirms this hybrid nature by stating the system uses trees to suggest relationships, indicating a compiled conclusion derived from combining user-submitted trees with DNA data. Now, if you ever needed to explain what through lines is to someone else, like in a research report, this gives us a really good starting point terminology to use. You may want to use something like this analysis in a final report, depending on the audience and who's reading it. So this one turned out well. The next one I would probably use as well. This one was for the land patent from Ancestry. And let's zoom in on this. So you can see that there's no image, it's just a derivative like index. And so it got this right. It says the image displays a digital screenshot of a web-based database entry, source type derivative, and it's classified as such based on the following visual evidence: the format versus the date. It's reporting an event dated in 1841 where web interfaces did not exist. So it correctly was able to follow the rules and figure out that this is indexed or transcribed data. And there's a lack of an original image with a placeholder image icon. So it does the same analysis that I would do. So I'm happy with my field agent so far. Now let's give it a harder one. So the last one was the ancestry matches by cluster, which I didn't mention in the prompt at all. So now it has to try to apply these rules to a new type of source. So it says the image is a digital screenshot of a web browser displaying a standard clusters analysis on the Ancestry website, characterized by a generated matrix of colored squares representing shared DNA matches, a layout typical of third-party clustering tools. So it's getting confused and it thinks this is a third-party tool. So then it gives it the source type of derivative with original elements. Analysis: this image contains a mix of source types. The cluster matrix it thinks is derivative. The primary content, the standard clusters matrix, and list of clusters is derivative. And so it's incorrectly assuming that this is created by Genetic Affairs AutoClusters or some sort of third-party tool. When it's not, it's created right within Ancestry. So I might need to tweak my instructions a little bit to just say, if it's on the Ancestry website, then it's original, unless it's combining trees with it, then it's authored. So that can be tricky. And there's a lot of challenges with analyzing DNA sources. And that's why we as humans have to understand them ourselves and be able to know what's going on. All right, so we had 2 successes and 1 failure, and hopefully I could tweak this to get it more accurate with every kind of source that I could add. And the good thing is that you can continue to tweak your instructions. And the other benefit of doing this is that it forces you to really think about what type of sources and understand where the source is coming from. And for something like MyHeritage that uses the auto clustering technology within MyHeritage, we would want to think about, is that technically third party or not? Since it's all being done within MyHeritage, I'd lean more toward the original source type. But the main takeaways here are that analysis and classification of sources are best when human defined. AI can help you work through your thinking, but they can't do the thinking for you. They'll just come up with their own rules, and it may not be helpful for us. Once we've got those rules and we've defined them, the AI tools with saved instructions can help you save the rules you came up with for repeatable tasks. So if we're going to be analyzing sources in our Airtable base all the time, it's great to have a field agent to do that for us. That's a repeatable task that we don't like doing over and over and retyping things. ChatGPT custom GPTs can also save those instructions. Also, Claude Skills, which is relatively new, and Gemini Gems. Those are all places where we can save instructions. And the last benefit that I didn't list here is I've kind of alluded to the fact that it generates the text for you. And instead of you having to type out your analysis, it can follow the principles and rules that you've set up and then create that typed analysis for you, in case you want to use that in your report, or if it helps you to think about the source and help you see if you need to look for a more original source. And that's always the goal of doing source analysis and labeling it as original, derivative, or authored. It helps you see how reliable something is and if you need to find an original source or what type of source would be better to look at. You know, if you're looking at through lines that's authored, it would be better to look at the original source, which would be the match page or the shared matches list. All right, well, I hope that that's helpful. And as we go forward with analyzing our DNA sources, in using AI, hopefully we can come up with good rules to help save us some time here.